So thank you, everyone. Welcome to another lecture. Thank you, Kim, for having me back. It's always a pleasure to come and lecture in this course, Technology in the Future of Medicine, something I'm very passionate about. We're going to get into introductions in a little bit. Thank you very much for also plugging the workshop that's going to come on December 4th. Set some high expectations for it. Thanks for the kind words, Kim. So hopefully you'll have a lot of fun. It's really interactive. Now, before we get into anything further, can anyone tell me what is projected on the screen there? Anyone? It's a road. Excellent. And has anyone here just gone and stood and looked and stared in amazement at the road? Whether you're out on a secondary highway, whether you're in the middle of the concrete jungle that is the city, whether you're here on campus, have you ever just stood and stared in awe at the road? Okay, so I'm seeing some shaking heads. All right, so homework assignment number 1. After this lecture, I want each and every one of you to go out and to stare at the road. I'm telling you this because I do this, partially because I'm a little bit crazy, partially because I genuinely feel excited and in awe every time I look at this pavement, this structure that we call the road, because it is the paragon, it is the symbolism, it is the track of what a game-changing innovation can lead to. All right, so where am I going with this? Can anyone tell me who this gentleman up here on the screen is? Sure. This is Henry Ford, and what is pictured beside him? Model T. All right, so this is why roads get me so excited. The automobile was a game changer. Whether you're talking about Afghanistan to Zimbabwe, from Bahrain to Turkey, cars are ubiquitous. It's often said that one person alone cannot change the world, or that's impossible to mold the world to your circumstances. Yet the automobile is one shining example of how we have changed the geography of the entire planet, the entire physical geography of our planet, to mold to ourselves, to usher in an era of personal transportation, whereas centuries ago, we would have to live in close proximity to one another, or we would have to brave, a journey of 30 kilometers over days by foot or by horse or by carriage. We can achieve this in an hour. Okay? Now, I'd like to point out the caveat. This wasn't an overnight innovation. Henry Ford did not wake up one day and say, hey, you know what? I am going to revolutionize the world. I'm going to create an automobile. Nor was he the first. If you read into the history of the automobile, it's absolutely fascinating. The automobile, the personal, motorized, steam-powered carriage, existed in many forms, dating as back as early as the 1700s, or sorry, the 17th century. What Henry Ford did was he built on the people and the innovations of the people before him. And I think you would agree with me that it's pretty hard to imagine life without an automobile today. Okay, so that's game changer number 1. All right, number 2, can anyone identify this gentleman? Edison. Okay, the light bulb might have given it away a little bit. Again, here's someone who is revered for changing the way we live our lives, for extending human life and culture and consciousness beyond the dark periods, beyond when the sun sets, so that we can live in a 24/7 society. Prior to the electricity, prior to the light bulb, we either lived by candlelight or we lived with the sun and slept when the sun went down. Again, I would like to point out, this is a game changer. If you look around us right now, this room is extremely well lit. Things like the automobile and the light bulb are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. The other thing I'd like to point out, again, this wasn't an overnight invention, nor was Thomas Alva Edison the first to come up with the light bulb. He didn't have a flash in the pan, light bulb explode over his head, metaphorically speaking, and then say, hey, I'm going to create the light bulb. This had actually existed in many forms before he had perfected it. Sir Humphrey Davies was one example of another inventor 40 years before who had tried to perfect the light bulb and had had limited success with it. Okay, game changer number 2. Okay, so why do I point up these examples? Because today we're going to talk about game changers, engineering tomorrow. What exactly does that mean? How do we foster these mindsets? How do we foster a culture of disruption and innovation? And what are other examples of innovations, disruptions that exist that pervade our society today? And where can we go from here? The point of this lecture is to be very, very interactive. So I promised you a little bit of a break because we're not doing the workshop today, but you only have a partial break. I fully expect you to ask any questions, challenge me at any time you want, to be very interactive. And in a second, I'm going to put you to your first task, okay? But first of all, I think you should probably know a little bit more about me. I'll introduce myself, and then it'll be your turn, okay? Let's put this in there because it's a little bit humorous. Definition of tomorrow. What is it? It's a mystical land where 99% of all productivity, motivation, and achievement is stored. Perfect for the procrastinator, but it also reminds us of the potential of everything we still have to achieve as humans, as scientists, as we progress. Okay? So, see a bunch of random logos on the screen. These are all parts and elements of who I am and relevant of why I'm here to talk to you today. So as Dr. Solez mentioned, I am currently a neurosurgical resident here at the University of Alberta. I also have backgrounds in space, so I've completed my master's in space studies at the International Space University, Strasbourg, France. Have conducted extensive research into space spin-off technologies, especially as they apply to medical benefits here on Earth. So I've written a book chapter on that. That's what you see up in the corner, that little pink book there. I've also taken time off from my medical studies to go down to an institution called Singularity University, based in California. It's at NASA Ames. Actually, that's where Kim and I met. And the whole premise of the institution is to leverage accelerating technologies for positive impact, to positively impact 1 billion people in 10 years. And some of my other affiliations, I've spent some time working with the European Space Agency at the Crew Medical Support Office. Spent some time researching at NASA Johnson Space Center. Basically, I've tried to carve out a career that's part rocket science, part brain surgeon, so rocket surgeon, if you will. Okay, so that's me. I do love brains. There's a little brain here that says all you need is a lobe. Always makes me laugh. Okay, so that's me. I promised you this would be a little bit interactive. All right, introductions, it's your turn. So who do I have here today? Why don't we start at the front? Everyone say a little bit about themselves, their names, maybe why they're here.
My name is Ross. I'm a physics student completing my PhD. Like you, I'm interested in space science, and I think that this course is a really good way of exposing myself to the kind of concepts that I'm going to be dealing with in my career for the remainder of my life.
I'm Bill. I was an electronics technician in physics for 33 years, and now I'm retired.
I'm Nolan. I'm a fourth-year undergrad from School of Business here, and my major is strategic management.
My name is Mike. I'm interested in medicine and business. I'm currently studying physiology at the University of Alberta, 4th year.
Hello, my name is Victor. I am a 4th year undergrad, currently studying neuroscience, so I like brains too. And the reason I'm here today is just to gain more perspective on how technology affects our society in the future and how it applies to medicine.
My name's Stefan. I'm first year and I'm majoring in science psychology.
Okay, my name is Osmar. I'm a professor in computing science and director of the Alberta Innovate Center for Machine Learning. and I'm here to listen to you.
Great. All right.
I'm Hannah, and I'm a first-year graduate student in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry in surgery.
All right, I think, sure, the more the merrier. This is great, you guys. You have excellent backgrounds, very diverse. We're going to talk about that too.
I'm a third-year general science student. I'm majoring in genetics. And
perfect. So we have science, business, management, researchers. We have established professionals. We have those who are just starting out. This is going to be a great talk, you guys, because I want you to walk out of here asking yourself, what is your role in things to come as we progress, as a race? Young or old, business or science, you all have a role to play. And I want you to keep thinking about that through the course of this talk. Okay? So let's just jump back to the beginning now. We talked about game changers. We talked about personal transportation. We talked about the automobile. We've talked about light bulbs. And I want to talk a little bit about airplanes. Just jumping back to game changers, this is another one. You know, the Wright brothers are widely credited with being pioneers in commercial and self-powered aviation. But again, it was a whole long process. It wasn't something that sprung up overnight. For centuries, for millennia even, the Chinese, the Indians, the Greeks, the Europeans all fantasized about flying. You might have heard the famous story of Leonardo da Vinci, who had designed and crafted his own personal flying machine. So these ideas aren't new, but people tweaked them, they built on them, and they made them better. And today we would be hard-pressed, in fact I would be very hard-pressed to find a single individual in society who has not had an encounter with each of the three, of the automobile, the aircraft, and the light bulb. And you can see here, they continue to evolve. A car, a Ford Model T at the turn of the 1900s isn't the same by any means as a Ford Focus today that is voice-activated, internet-connected. Okay? All right, so this is where I turn it back over to you again. I'm going to ask you to come up with a few other ideas or innovations, examples of ideas that have been game changers. Just look around you. What is it that has revolutionized the way we work, the way we function? And you don't even have to look very far. You can look around you in this room, and I'm sure you'll come up with examples. So, yeah.
You're using a computer.
Yes, computer. And I think if you're like me, and I suspect you are, because you're in a course on technology, you feel a little bit exposed when you're more than 2 feet away from a computer. Anyone else? Yeah. Yes, the cell phone and the smartphone. Some of us refer to it as the external brain. You know, years and years ago, it was a big deal to have a landline, then a giant cellular telephone, as I'm sure you've seen movies from the 80s, things that are the size of a stereo. And then suddenly, someone one day woke up and said, hey, what if this thing could be more than a phone? What if it can be a banking machine? What if it can be a personal navigator? What if it can be an external brain for myself? Okay? Anyone else? One more. Nolan. The internet, yes. And these are all great examples because they're all interconnected. A computer and a phone, you know, they're one and the same to a certain extent now. And a phone without connectivity is useless. Okay? So I was brainstorming on this when I was putting together this talk. And I came up with many of the same ideas that you did. Came up with the smartphone, personal computer, the internet, the personal communications, or sorry, the communication satellite. And of course, since this is a course on medicine as well, I looked in the medical sphere to think about innovations that have changed our lives. So vaccinations and infection control. It might seem like a very non-technological, non-advanced kind of innovation, but hand washing is huge. Years and years and years ago, way, way, way back before any one of us can remember, or our fathers or our great-grandfathers can remember, the human lifespan was 30 years. And then someone looked into it and said, hey, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. What if we started washing our hands? What if we cleaned our instruments after surgery? What if we introduced sterile precautions when we deliver babies? And all of a sudden, mortality rates started going down. Hand washing. It's not very technologically advanced, but soap and water have brought us further than you can imagine. Here's a personal favorite of mine, anesthesia, because it allows surgeons to do what we need to do and causing far less trauma and less pain in certain cases to the patient, and in certain cases, making possible procedures that we would be otherwise unable to do, and thereby saving lives. So these are all ideas of examples of innovations, big and small, that have changed and revolutionized the way we live. Oh, and here's my personal favorite, because it was cold when I was putting this talk together, indoor heating, the thermostat. I think all of us living here in Edmonton, Alberta can appreciate that, okay? All right, so these are things that already exist today. Now we're going to take it one step further. I want each and every one of you to take a few seconds, maybe turn to your partner, turn to someone around you and say, okay, what is the next big game changer? When you were little, what did you imagine that human society would be like today? Did you want your flying car? Did you want your personal robot? Did you think that we would be light years ahead of the Jetsons by now? What are you waiting for that hasn't happened yet? Or what do you think is going to happen? What would you like to exist that doesn't already today? Take a few seconds. When you're ready, put up your hand, and I'd like to hear from you. You can grab the mic.
Maybe affordable space transportation, so we could go into other planets. And
yeah, affordable space transportation. I'm a huge fan of that. And just say your names as you before you speak, so I can reinvigorate my brain.
Okay, my name is Stefan, and teleportation.
Teleportation, that would be awesome. I commute in from Sherwood Park every day, so I would be a huge fan of that.
Closer. It's a closer future than teletransportation. A better battery to store energy that may look infinite for us, because today we have to recharge and recharge. It'll be a huge game changer if we have a technology that can store enough energy for a long time, whether it's for a car or for a telephone or whatever.
So better ways of storing energy, exactly. And even alternate energy sources are huge. You know, a lot of the world is all excited about the news last week. I don't know if any of you are following world headlines, but the U.S. has been projected to become the world's most major producer of oil and fossil fuels in the next 10 years. And you can see some people making faces. Some people were really excited about this. And when I heard this, I was thinking, how short-sighted is this? Why do we want to keep on perpetuating our reliance on fossil fuels, which we know to be non-renewable, which we know to be a significant contributor to climate change and very harmful to the environment, when we should be exploring alternate energies? Okay. Anyone else have any other examples? Yeah, Hannah.
I mean, I know it's kind of going on right now too, but personalized medicine through gene analysis, I think it's going to get bigger.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I've specifically revamped this talk so we have more time for discussion at the end. And that's one of the things I want to talk about is trends in medicine, and set up the stage for what you guys are going to do next session with the workshop. Okay. All right. So I'm really glad that you guys threw out some really exciting big ideas. And actually I want to tell you that no matter how far out and how crazy and how impossible something might seem, odds are that someone somewhere on this planet is working on it today. I'm just going to take the next few slides to tell you about this fantastic world of ours and why I'm amazed that every single time I walk out on a road and think of the innovation, the work that went out into it, and how much it excites me for revolutions of technology to come. Okay, so this slide focuses on what we call 3D printing. Has anyone here heard of 3D printing? Okay, has anyone here not heard of 3D printing? Okay, so a good mix. Okay, so 3D printing. Imagine that you one day wanted to play with a Spider-Man doll. You're 6 years old again, you have no worries in the world, you just want to play with superheroes. But then the next day you get bored and realize that Spider-Man in your 6-year-old mind is much cooler than Batman, and you really wish that you had a Batman, or sorry, a Spider-Man toy. Your parents, being money-wise, refuse to go to the store and buy you a new one. What if you had a machine that you just put in the inputs of whatever toy, the models, the parameters, whatever toy you want. You provide the raw materials, and then it prints out whatever you want. That's a thing now. So the 3D printing revolution has come on really in the latter half of this decade, and it's exactly that. You have what we call the printer component. You feed in the parameters into your computer and say, hey, I want to print a piece of artwork. I want to print a piece of, I want to print a toy. I want to print food. And you pour in the basic components, and your machine will print out this customized model. And why this is really exciting is because it has implications, ramifications for everything from entertainment, as we've just talked about, to things like housing. So when I spent some time down in California at Singularity University, one of the other groups who was there, who was working on a big world-changing idea, thought, why not apply 3D printing to the housing market? They did their research and found that if you had a 3D printer large enough, it would use 70% less waste, 70% less energy, and in 2 days you could print a house for 70% less cost. Imagine the repercussions for the bottom billion or the 2 billion people in this world living in abject poverty. Suddenly, housing becomes affordable. So this is a really exciting potential for this technology, and they're actually working on overcoming barriers right now. The last I checked in with them, they were trying to overcome the 6-foot wall, literally the 6-foot wall was the wall they'd hit, because they're trying to build walls higher than that could overcome setting too fast versus setting too slow. And we can talk more about that later if anyone has any questions. Something that really excites me, you can see up here on this, this snapshot from a TED presentation, 3D printing for organs. Now what happens if you took your base material to be cells? And what happens if you said, okay, this patient needs a heart, there are no donors available, but this is the approximate size of heart he needs. He's, 40-year-old male. He's going through heart failure due to some congenital disease he's had since birth. There's no hearts available, when the only ones available are either too small, either a child or are not a match, and he would reject it and it wouldn't go very well. Or even if there was a match, he would have to be on immunosuppressants for life. What if he said, okay, well, let's ignore all of that. We have our 3D printer here, we have the base materials here, we have the cells. Let's put in the approximate size heart we need and print out a heart. Like that, you've overcome issues of scarcity, you've overcome issues of tissue matches. That's what the potential of 3D printing is. Okay? So let's talk about some other fairy tale pie in the sky ideas. Literally, this is kind of pie in the sky. So some of you might have heard the famous catchphrase, the famous Google search, it's 2000X, where's my flying car? And those of us who've grown up in the Jetsons era, myself included, probably imagined by now at some point in our lives we would have flying cars in a 3-dimensional traffic grid. Well, a small company out of MIT in Boston called Terrafugia thought, it's about time we had our flying cars, and so let's build it. So they started in 2006, and this is their first model. I believe this is called the Transform, and basically it's a hybrid road vehicle and aerial vehicle. So as you can see here in the first shot, it's in ground mode. give it some runway, give it a highway, allow it to gather some speed, and this car all of a sudden it becomes a flying vehicle. And they gathered their first FAA clearance last year, so things are happening. They're selling this for about $200,000, and it's, I think going to be on sale later this year, or is on sale already. But it's another example of really exciting things people are working on. Now this one's a bit closer to home, this being a technology and medicine course. So does anyone know what's on the screen behind me? Has anyone seen this or heard of this before? No, that's perfect. Okay. So let me ask you another question. Prior to this prosthetic arm, that's what it is. It's a prosthetic arm for amputees, for people who've had severe damage to their tissues. Do you know what the prosthesis was for a replacement arm? Yeah, sure. Yeah, the hooks, exactly. It was the hook. Nothing had changed since the 1600s. Or, you know, if you wanted something a little bit more cosmetically appealing but less functional, because a hook does have its functions, you had a wooden or a plastic hand that couldn't do anything. That's when DARPA, in the past 10, 15 years, said, okay, well, that won't do. We have all these soldiers coming back who've served a country, coming back from war, who have to deal with a hook. They've lost their limbs, and this is the best we can do. That won't do. So they launched the DARPA challenge for a better prosthesis. And this is what they came up with. If you watch the videos, I actually haven't included one in this lecture, but if you Google it and you look it up on YouTube, the amount of degrees of freedom that this thing has is amazing. You can watch later versions of this arm actually catch a ball. It has 25 degrees of freedom. It can move at the elbow, it can move at the wrist, it can move at the fingers. That versus a hook. You were giving someone their life back. Okay? This one's a little bit closer to home, myself training in neurosurgery. So brain-computer interfaces. They've long been the realm of science fiction. And in science fiction, you know, some people use it to enhance their brains or have an external brain or make themselves part man, part machine. But let's look at the most here and now application. Patients who are quadriplegic, paraplegic, who have locked-in syndrome, who have a functioning brain but a body that won't comply. How do we give them their lives back? How do we give them some quality of life? Brain-computer interfaces are here, they're on the rise, and the first studies are being done to allow patients, by training them, by teaching them to move a cursor on a screen, to have some degree of conversation and inputs and outputs with the world. Back in 2007, there was a study that appeared in Nature. They were, I like to call the study telekinetic robo-monkeys, and what they did, it was amazing. They took these monkeys and they wired electrodes into the motor cortices. That's the part of your brain that allows you to do things, to open, to close your hands. And they wired electrodes to the motor cortices of these monkeys, attached them to an external robotic arm. And they trained these monkeys to feed themselves grapes and marshmallows with these robotic arms, merely by thinking about it. Now, the research is still evolving, but imagine that someday in the future, people who have lost limbs, who have their own limbs, who have lost control of their own arms, can suddenly regain some degree of function. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the Berkeley Bionics exoskeleton. It looks a little bit something like something from the future, like from Terminator or from something equally futuristic. I've actually had the privilege of watching a live demonstration of this. So the Berkeley exoskeleton, it looks pretty hefty, but it's exactly that. It's a bionic exoskeleton designed to let quadriplegics walk again. It may seem hefty, but the way they've designed the external skeleton, the patient can actually walk again. And I wish I'd include some videos of this, because it really is mesmerizing to watch someone who's previously been a paraplegic strap on an exoskeleton, have that bear the weight of their body, have it have force feedback from the world around them, and let them take steps again. It really is amazing. Okay, switching gears now. This is another passion of mine, and from what I gather in the audience, we have some space fans out there. Virgin Galactic, has anyone heard about them? Yeah, a few of you. Okay, so who knows what Virgin Galactic does? Yeah, anyone want to shout it out? Private space flight. That's right. No longer is space flight in the realm of major governments and federal entities. There is a select group of dreamers/doers out there, the crazy billionaires that include the likes of Richard Branson of the Virgin brand, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Elon Musk of PayPal and Tesla, and now SpaceX, who are dreaming of turning their passion for space into reality. And you see that with companies like Virgin Galactic, who won the X Prize back about 10 to 15 years ago, who made the first suborbital flights happen, and then who have since created iterations of the first private suborbital vehicles, which can take tourists up to space, allow them to experience zero gravity, and not have it be something that's only limited to a very, very select portion of humanity anymore. You look at companies like SpaceX, who said, why are we continuing to let big entities, government-run entities, and space agencies bear the brunt of the cost and the materials of sending people and objects into space? The United States is no longer the position it was in the 1960s during the Cold War era. They have nothing to prove to the world in the space realm. They have their own social issues in terms of healthcare, in terms of an aging population, that are rightly so their priorities. So how can they afford to keep up the costs of a manned space program and send people to the International Space Station, to the moon, to Mars, and beyond? That's when Elon Musk said, well, why don't we do it ourselves? Created SpaceX, created the Dragon and the Falcon 9 vehicles, and launched proof of concept, and now has the Dragon shuttling people, ferrying them to the International Space Station. It's another example of, if you can dream it, you can do it. Okay? So we're just going to switch tacks a little bit, take things closer to home. So I just want to assure you that these ideas aren't fairy tales from far-off labs. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own personal experiences now, some of the cool projects I've worked on. And the idea is to tell you and to show you that ideas that might seem a little bit outside the realm of everyday life are actually feasible, and they're being worked on here and now. Okay? So this is one of the projects I worked on a few years ago. It's called Neuro-arm.org. And basically, it's a robotic arm that can do brain surgery. I didn't think that was possible either until I heard of it. This is, you can see some screenshots here in the back. I'm not sure how well it's projecting. But basically, has everyone here heard of the Canadarm? That's one of our most important contributions as Canadians to the space exploration. So that's that mechanical, that robotic arm that is responsible for repairs and maintenance of the International Space Station. So same company, similar technologies, and spun off for brain surgery. And so I was responsible for the research with the preclinical and early clinical trials. And this robot is amazing. It offers advantages that regular surgery wouldn't. Which isn't to say that there isn't a learning curve to overcome and that has its own hurdles. But where humans can only operate on a scale of millimeters, this offers finer precision, micrometers of precision, filters out the tremor that we all naturally have, filters out the waiver on the larger scale that we already have. It's called axis locking. So when you go in to your target, whether it's a tumor, you're locked on your axis. It's also compatible with MRI, so MR imaging. So you can take a picture of an MR picture of a patient's brain during an operation and have that soft tissue resolution, all with the robot in the room. And the surgeon no longer is he standing for hours. He's sitting very nicely, prettily, and comfortably in a different room with 4 different monitors showing him where he's at, showing the live field, showing him what the parameters of his robot are. Okay. The next project I want to tell you about that I worked on was this past spring at Johnson Space Center in Houston in Texas. This isn't a single technology per se, but it deals with long duration spaceflight. And so I worked with the team there on near-Earth asteroid missions. So what happens when we finally have the capabilities to go beyond the moon, go beyond Mars, and go on a long duration spaceflight all the way to a near-Earth asteroid? Well, surely there's some medical considerations to think of. And so during this project, I helped design the medical kit, the medical contents, and medical protocols for dealing with scenarios that might happen during a long-term space flight. So what kind of things might you have to worry about that can come up? Anything, any kind of medical problem. Anyone? Fungal infections, that's a good one. A gross one, but a good one. Yeah, infections. Anyone else? Bone deterioration, that's a really good one. So as Ross pointed out, and as fans of spaceflight know, without gravity to put an axial load on your bones, you'll actually become osteoporotic, which is a problem with lots of little old ladies here on Earth. But with young, healthy, middle-aged males in space who have no gravity to compress their bones, essentially lose bone density. Anyone else? Yeah.
Loss of muscle mass, ataxia?
Yeah, exactly. Coupled with bone loss is loss of muscle mass. Again, it affects more the axial muscles, the weight-bearing bones and muscles. Without resistance training, you have to think about all these, you have to think about not only preventing disease and infections, but also keeping your population healthy. So specifically with this project, I worked with the medical team there to look at not so much countermeasures, but actual medical scenarios. So what happens if someone gets appendicitis in space? It's not convenient to deal with. What happens if you get a kidney stone in space or something in your eye and a corneal eye abrasion? Not so easy to deal with, but they will come up and you do need to deal with them. I won't get too much into it because it does get a little bit more involved and technical, but I'm happy to answer questions about it afterwards. Okay, and then the last project I want to talk to you about is the company I co-founded during my time at Singularity University. So as I mentioned briefly in the introduction, I took some time off during medical school to head down to Singularity U. It's based at NASA Ames in Silicon Valley. It's essentially the brainchild of the founders of the Space University, as well as backed by Google. And the way they phrase their mission is, how would you positively impact 1 billion people in 10 years using accelerating technology? And the reason why I'm talking about this now is because in the next part of this talk, we're going to talk about elements of design and fostering an environment of disruption and innovation. And I want to pull on some key lessons here. Okay? So when we were posed this question, this is the founding team here. We're doing some crazy X thing because our code name at the time was something called Zidar. For those of you who are mathematically inclined, you'll know a radix is a term denoting a linear